speaking of housing, as we were speaking of before on stream, and issues with regards to how much social housing is, what the regulations around housing are, and obviously most of my chat will know that I bemoan the housing situation in this country literally every day because I don't think we have enough social housing, we don't have enough council housing, and there are too many landlords, and landlords have too much power. While somebody disagrees with me, though, about how much power landlords have, is Tom Harwood of GB News. So, context of why I'm bringing up Tom Harwood here is that one of the things in the Renters Reform Bill, which is basically the Conservatives and Michael Gove's baby, specifically, as a ploy to try and win back younger voters by making the private rented sector better for young people, because that's really and truly housing is one of the big reasons why the Tories have lost young people, aside from all of the terrible other parts of their ideology. But housing is basically so expensive that it's unable to live as a young person in this country. So Michael Gove introduced the Renters Reform Bill as their plan to try and tackle issues of housing for young people. One of the parts of these things is banning Section 21 notices. Now what these are colloquially known as no-fault evictions, where it means that if a landlord wants to get you out of their property that you live in, you have no recourse because they are the ones in control, and they can get rid of you essentially with a certain notice period for no reason whatsoever. They have to give a reason. So that the provisions under the ban would be that we're going to ban Section 21 notices whilst giving them more leniency to extract people if they break a tenancy agreement or if they're engaging in antisocial behaviour. This has made certain landlords pretty mad about them having to adhere to more rules and regulations in terms of their provision of housing as a landlord. Not really provision though, because they're just holding it to ransom, but I digress. And one other person who I mentioned before who's mad about this is Tom Harwood, but seemingly for very strange reasons. So let's have a look at what he said here. It is absolute gaslighting to call the conclusion of a mutually agreed time-limited contract a no-fault eviction. How has this become common parlance? It's because they're evicting somebody and the people aren't at fault. But what he's saying here is that, well, if you agree to a minimum term on your lease, that's your fault for not agreeing a longer time, and you should be able to be evicted at any chance at the end of that mutually agreed contract. Again, the market is what's important to this man. But they have been evicted and there's no fault. That's why it's called a no-fault eviction. Most tenancies are assumed in this country once you reach the end of the minimum contracted period to then roll over into a rolling contract, or to then recontract for a further amount of time. Housing is for people to live in. It is for social utility. It is there so people have a place to be able to participate in the world. It is not just a commodity, Tom. And people will live in it as a really important part of their lives, not just as something that they use specifically and that they have to throw away at the end of the day. It's not a commodity like other commodities are. Where you live is really important, what you have access to. And if landlords, just because a tenancy agreement is ended, can go, well, actually, you're out, next person in, jack up the rents, that undermines the social utility of housing as a commodity. And that's why quote tweeted him out. So the only reason you think this is if you have no concept of societal utility and you can only conceive of anything as being a commodity within a market. So he's describing this as the let's ban all tenancies from having an end date bill, and is so monumentally anti-market and anti-choice. I mean, I'm anti-market, good. Screw markets. Societal utility is more important than providing things via markets. I'm glad that we're being anti-market. It almost boggles his mind that the party of Thatcher is pushing it through Parliament. It's almost like the party of Thatcher screwed over young people and young people hate it and they don't want to be out of Parliament forever. I know this is your little ideological thing that you're believing in. And I'm not saying that it's bad to be ideological. I'm just saying that your ideology is shit. And what it's led to is precarity for working people. Obviously, he doesn't have to care. But Tom Roberts rich enough with all of the money, the Emirati petrodollars, that he stuffs his pockets full from Legatum, who pay GB News to then employ him as a commentator. He doesn't have to really care about the precarious nature of renting in this country. But of course, the precarity is fine because it's just a mutually enjoyed contract where one person has all the power, the people who own the property, and when people have no power, the people who are terrified of being homeless, because that's what you get if you don't have anywhere to live. That's the power that landlords hold. And just even a tiny bit of removal of that power from landlords by stopping them from just being able to throw people out on the streets at a moment's notice as soon as their contract is up is apparently beyond the pale for this man. It fits outside of his ideological bubble of marketisation and commodification of everything. It's as if the election has been and gone. Perhaps 2025 won't feel all that different. I mean, You said it, buddy. The 2019 Tory manifesto said, "We will abolish no-fault evictions." I bet you £1 billion that the average person reading no-fault evictions thought it referred to mid-contract evictions, not the fact that people leave their flat once their tenancy has ended. No, we all saw this and thought about what it actually means. It's only you who think that everything is all just done by contract law. It's all just done by people acting individually as market actors rather than viewing a house as the place that they live, the home that they have cultivated for themselves, the connections that they've made, the places that they live, the neighbours that they know. Because again, these Thatcherite weirdos have no concept of this. They have no concept of societal utility whatsoever. And they even asked, creating a fairer rental market. This man does not want a fairer rental market. We agree on some things with regards to housing. We both want there to be good urban planning in this country. We both like mid-rise housing. We both like walkable cities. He thinks the private sector should have at it. I disagree with that. But we both want there to be at least more housing. But he wants it to be all private housing. He wants it all the power to be with the landlords by not having any restrictions of what they can and can't do with regards to evictions. And he doesn't want there to be money spent on social housing. Even Albi Amankona from GB News and also from the Conservative Party wants us to build more social housing. And that's too far, even for Tommy Boy. Like, we genuinely need far more social housing in this country. Michael Gove was on Laura Kuenssberg on Sunday explicitly saying that they're going to put ring-fenced funding for councils specifically to build new council housing. And Tom Harwood is just absolutely taken aback at the idea that Michael Gove might want to stop the Conservative Party from being cast into the electoral wilderness for a generation because of how much they've screwed young people over. I hate Michael Gove. I think he's an awful human being. But at least he recognises the problem here. And Tom Harwood just thinks, well, actually, you know who's really being ruined, who's being screwed over by this? It's landlords. Landlords and wanting to have complete control over their tenants. And they're being taken that away from them by a Conservative government who may thought maybe renters might need some protections whatsoever. The Conservative Party have tried to do one good thing. They own the 25% of their members that are landlords want to stop them doing it. And Tom Harwood is desperately defending them, despite being a renter himself. He probably believes the whole thing boils down to a personal lifestyle choice. I mean, this is basically conservative ideology writ large. Everything is a lifestyle choice. Everything is a market. Power is completely irrelevant in any discussion, and societal utility doesn't exist. That's how you get to these positions. To say the tenant had a choice in the length of the lease is ridiculous and show how ignorant that guy is. If the landlord says the lease is for 6 months, the tenant has to accept that or has no home. Well, that's literally it. That's 100% of the case here, Daryl. You're absolutely right to point out that hypocrisy here, or the ignorance that's being pointed out here, is that, yeah, the landlord's the one who set the leasing terms. At least in places like Berlin, where people rely on private rentals, like we now do here, like we shouldn't be doing, we should rely on social rentals. In Berlin, if you have a private rental, the restrictions are so heavy that you have to give huge guarantees in the length of time people can stay there, so they have some level of settledness in the place that they live, so they can keep the connections and they can have security in the place that they live. People living in continual levels of insecurity in this country, in pay, in sickness, in the conditions that they live, in the provision of public services. Why are we giving them even more levels of insecurity by giving landlords this undue power to be able to evict them at a moment's notice? It's ridiculous. And the fact that he's defending this as a renter, it just shows you how Thatcherism as a concept screws your mind up. It's an anti-human ideology, Thatcherism. And this is another casualty here, because you just cannot comprehend why people want these things. Hey there, if you enjoyed the video, make sure that you like and leave a comment. That helps the video out in the algorithm. If you subscribe and ring the bell, it'll let you know when I go live. I stream every day on YouTube and Twitch. You can also follow all of my socials down in the description. And if you want to support me in a more financial manner, there's a join button for membership to just 99p to be a member on YouTube, as well as a Patreon, and there's some merch there as well. And hopefully I'll catch you on the next video. Take care.